The smell of fresh rain mingled with the cold sweat on my back as I stood outside the gallery, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. The posters inside, edges curling in the damp wind, advertised the New Voices showcase, a tangle of names and film stills, none of them mine. 3 of my colleagues' names were printed in crisp type, glossy above faces grinning in anticipation. A few months back, I imagined mine alongside theirs. Renata Barbosa, documentary filmmaker. The convener had offered me her practiced apology as she pressed my submission folder back into my hands. We decided to go a different direction this time, Renata, but thank you for sharing your vision. Maybe next year. The disappointment tasted metallic, bitter. I kept my smile thin, nodded, and pretended not to notice the sideward glances from the others huddled beneath the gallery's awning. Wind pushed the rain sideways, seeping through my favorite thin jacket. I could hear Daniel, my cousin, inside, his easy laugh traveling through the open door. He was there supporting Tatiana, his girlfriend, whose cityscape photo series hummed near the entrance. The fact that I'd come at all was a point of pride for my mother, who told anyone who would listen how brave and driven her daughter was. The truth was less impressive. I was mostly stubborn and hopelessly in love with the idea of telling stories through my camera. While the artists and their friends sipped cheap vino and compared festival rejections like scars, all I wanted was to scrape off the sticky, witnessing sympathy clinging to my skin. I told myself, as I have since school, that patience is the long game. If I could be patient, humiliation would fade and something new would take root. When the crowd thinned, I slipped in quietly to find my mother. Tia Celeste intercepted me near the door. "My dear, so sorry about tonight," she said and patted my wrist. "Not everyone is cut out for all this. Why not pursue something steadier? You know, Daniel just got promoted." I pictured the little apartment my cousin Daniel had just bought in Lime, the one with a sliver of sea view if you craned your neck out the window. I let her words wash over me, murmured something polite, and found my mother by the food table, refilling her wine. She squeezed my hand. "Vamos embora, filla." On the way out, I caught Tatiana's eye. She looked genuinely sorry for me, which somehow was worse than her being smug. She gave me an apologetic smile as her hand curled possessively around Daniel's arm. A few years ago, we'd all been equally hopeful, but now I was the one still waiting to be taken seriously. In the taxi ride home, the city blurred behind rain-streaked glass. Lapa's arches floated through fog, and motorbikes weaved past yellow-lit windows. My mother talked in her soft half-whisper about bureaucracy and bills, about the fear she'd always had for my thin-skinned dreams. "You have to be strong, Rena. People will always laugh before they understand. But you, Fila, you keep trying." I answered with a nod, but the truth was, I wasn't sure how many more rejections I could survive. My father had wanted me to work at his hardware store. I remembered the mornings spent stacking paint cans, the smell of sawdust and grease clinging to my uniform. Even there, between the rows of varnish and screws, I daydreamed of other people's lives, imagined stories unfolding in favelas and city squares. But nobody else seemed to understand why it meant so much, as if my obsession with documentary films was an expensive hobby, a passing fancy. Over the months that followed, I submitted my work everywhere: contests, grants, streaming sites, international and local festivals. My inbox filled with one rejection after another. Some offered kind feedback, but most said little or nothing. People in my building sometimes smiled too kindly when they asked how things were going. Even my aunt stopped introducing me as her aspiring filmmaker niece and instead dropped the adjective as if I'd grown too old for that sort of determination. At family gatherings, conversation circled the usual safe topics: my cousin's new condo, my brother's law degree. I watched them, picking invisible lint off my jeans, and tried not to let their skepticism fill the silences. Then, one sweltering late spring afternoon, I found myself on the tram between Gloria and Santa Teresa, clutching my camera bag to my chest. For weeks, I'd been following news of a housing struggle in Providência, where residents were facing eviction for luxury development. The news covered the protests for a day before losing interest. But I couldn't let it go. The faces I'd seen, the battered photographs nailed to doors, the voices hoarse with hope and exhaustion. The day was glassy hot, the city shimmering beneath a blue glare. In Providência, boys in flamenco jerseys chased a deflated ball up steep steps slick from the rain, the air full of distant arguing and afternoon frying oil. I set up my tripod on a landing where old Dona Rosa sat on an upturned crate, her bare feet splayed. Eyes bright with indignation. "Why are you asking questions, Menina?" she challenged when I introduced myself. I explained why I'd come, that I wanted to understand from the inside, that I'd grown up listening to stories that had never been told. I didn't mention rejection, of course, or the laughter that sometimes followed me from family to Rua do Senado and back again. She peered at me skeptically. "You're not one of them?" I shook my head. "I don't have money or powerful friends. Just this." I touched my camera. "And a promise to listen right." She eyed me for a long moment, then waved me in. "Então entra. But you film what you see, not only what you want." I spent weeks climbing those hills, learning the rhythms of Providência. The market wives, the little kids playing capoeira on the square, jobless men helping each other reinforce falling rooftops. The small, swollen victories of resisting eviction, court orders, city officials. Petition drives became my story. I slept badly at night, images replaying in my mind. Sometimes I caught myself crying in the shower, but I kept going back with my battered camera and notepad. At home, when I described what I was doing, my father would listen but remain visibly skeptical, drumming his fingers on the kitchen tabletop. My mother fussed over laundry, too polite to ask if any of it paid. At a birthday lunch, Tia Celeste adopted her Socratic tone. "And after you finish this one, Renata, what will you do next?" The only answer I had was, "Keep going." My own certainty, such as it was, became a thread I clung to in the dark. By the end of that summer, I had over 40 hours of footage. I worked every night editing on borrowed software, piecing together faces, voices, crackling moments of hope and defeat. The power in our building failed twice during thunderstorms, erasing hours of progress. But I started again, half blind with fatigue. When my first cut was done, I sent Barro e Esperança, Mud and Hope, to local festivals, online platforms, and a handful of international grants. Weeks stretched into months. The silence was its own kind of humiliation. But patience, I reminded myself, was still the game. I started temping at a school to pay bills. Each time I opened my inbox, hope stuttered, then sputtered, then reignited. One line, one reply, one maybe. Then, after months of nothing, one email arrived. It was from a producer in the U.S., attached to a small human rights festival. She wrote, "Your story stunned our team. We want it for the closing night. Could we also talk about international distribution?" For a moment, I sat staring at the screen, motionless, except for the wild thundering of my heart. Only when I reread her words did I realize I was crying, breathlessly, as if someone had suddenly handed me permission to exist. Somehow, in a haze, with my head fuzzy with disbelief, things began to change. Barro e Esperanza was invited to selections in Buenos Aires, Lisbon, then Amsterdam, and even São Paulo's festival, where finally some friends grudgingly agreed to attend. Each time I saw the film projected against a blank white wall, Dona Rosa's face enormous, her words echoing in rooms full of strangers, I felt more real, more anchored. Doors that had formerly slammed closed on my knuckles began to creak open. Small grants arrived. An NGO asked if I'd come shoot their work in Maranhão. A streaming platform called, "We saw the Providência film. What else are you working on?" Through it all, I kept quiet at home. Habit, maybe, but also fear. That too much hope, spoken aloud, would jinx what tiny luck I'd found. Then, 2 years after that rain-washed gallery night, it happened. The new municipal gallery in Botafogo invited me to debut a retrospective with Barro e Esperanza at the center. They wanted locals to see it, especially the people involved. They would send a press release, print an enormous poster, offer me the opening night slot. I said yes with a calm voice, but inside I soared. I asked Donna Rosa, Lucio, and the other residents if they wanted to attend, promised tickets, taxis for the older folks, dinner after. Most agreed with wry amusement, almost disbelieving that their story would be considered art. They joked about dressing up, asked if there'd be coxinhas and beer. When the night came, rain threatened again, but the clouds held back, a hesitant blessing. I arrived early, nerves knotted in my stomach, heart jackhammering against my chest. My hair was tied back, practical and simple, dress